All right, it's time to talk Kansas City Chiefs football as we review the NFL draft for 2022 with Mr. Thomas Pike, who is now a podcaster. Well, I wouldn't call him full time, but the writing is at least on pause mostly, and it's the podcast deal. So tell us a little bit about this new gig you have, Tom, and good to have you back.
Yeah, excited to be back. So, yeah, I get to talk Chiefs with my good pals Kyle and Garrett over at the Kingdom Says podcast. During the season, we do weekly shows, sometimes twice a week if we have the availability. But we, yeah, right now we're a little slowed down with the off season. We don't want to be, talking about nothing. But yeah, we stay up to date, cover all the Chiefs news, and get a little bit into the AFC West and some of the other business that happens. It's a lot of responsibility when you've been dominating the division for the past couple years.
That's
so
true.
Gotta keep an eye on those other teams. So yeah, it's a great group of guys to get to work with over there, and just really enjoyed it. So
well, looking forward to it. Again, the Kingdom Says on the Say It Again network. Before we get into the draft for the Chiefs, because we talked to you, of course, before the draft, not a whole lot of roster stuff going on, but I did want to ask you about this Eric Bieniemy news again, and whether or not it's just one of those off-season things that's going to go away. The LeSean McCoy coming out and look, there were some innuendos. I'm sure you have a lot more knowledge about what's going on. I mean, the fans outside Kansas City are probably thinking, oh, well, based on what Andy Reid says, this Bieniemy guy must be like a tough SOB, during practices and so forth. And maybe is that somehow part of the reason why he's not getting along with the people, the higher ups that he's interviewing jobs for?
yeah, so I apologize. I think you cut out there for a second, but just the Eric Bieniemy stuff. It's really interesting. So Bieniemy's had just a weird off season in Kansas City. He's got a lot of criticism after the AFC Championship game. It's been tough. Him being somebody who's kind of been through the head coaching cycle so much, and still hasn't gotten a job, and people are, well, why is it? Andy Reid swears by the man. Patrick Mahomes has always, spoken highly of him in public. It's interesting that McCoy made the comments, and then I think the other part about that was Andy Reid's response. It was pretty fiery for Andy Reid, who's usually pretty professional about things, and he essentially said, well, when LeSean played for us, he wasn't really the youngest guy. He wasn't as fast or as athletic as he used to be, and some guys have a hard time accepting that.
Yeah, I know, right?
And accepting the feedback. So that is about as harsh as Andy Reid is going to get, especially to a guy who played with him in Philly. It's not like Andy's a pretty loyal person across the board. So
well, thank goodness
advice,
LeSean McCoy was white. I mean, black. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Because if he was white, then who knows what would have transpired in the news with that one, with what's going on. But look, it's not a surprise that, like you said, that the coach and the quarterback, the two big headpieces, and they've won a Super Bowl together and all that, are going to defend Bieniemy. Of course they are. So you tell me then, do you know whether or not there's any truth behind that?
I will tell you that he is a tough, like, from all the reports, he's a very tough coach. Yeah. But it's about how players respond to that, right?
Yes.
He's not going to, you'll see him on the sidelines he will tear into Patrick Mahomes, just like he'll tear into, the third string running back. It's about accountability for him.
I got no problem with that.
Yeah. And again, maybe not everybody's cup of tea. But I do think he's kind of maybe in that mold of a older school, tough as nails kind of coach. That's his leadership style, right? And maybe that's not everybody's.
That day and age of hiring those guys is just come and gone.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements to it. I think that he's got a good relationship with his players. I just think that on the outside, it's hard to see that sometimes, and people are scared. And then there's some PR stuff from his background. There's always the questions about, Andy's, obviously the last offensive coordinator to get hired from Andy Reid's tree was Matt Nagy, and he didn't do great in Chicago. Doug
He's
Peterson.
back.
Yeah, he came back. So we'll see. But Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl in Philly and then kind of fizzled
That's
out.
true.
So
Yeah.
it's
Hey, won a Super Bowl.
a bunch of factors that play into it.
All right, now let's go in and get into this conversation why we have you here, and that's the draft. So we'll get into some of the rookie free agent signings as well, because I thought that I think it was the Colts that did a phenomenal. I hadn't seen a better class of rookie signings maybe ever, but the Chiefs, not large like 8 or 9, but for the fact that there were at least 4 or 5 guys that I was very impressed with that they signed, and they have a 9-man class. And what's interesting about that, we talked about it, and I mentioned it in the Our Lads draft guide, was that Brett Veach in his 5th year was only the 2nd time that he had a first-round draft pick, and he actually ended up with 2. Also, this draft, he had 4 picks in the top 62. And in the previous 4 years, he only had 1 in 62. In the first 62 of the draft. That is incredible. But I also believed that, especially after what we saw here with the 9 picks and the quality signings, that they felt that we have to start stocking the team with quality depth. It can't just be all about a limited, let's trade up, let's get these premium players. Sooner or later, you have to have depth on your team.
Yeah.
You still there? Did you hear what I said, Tom?
Yeah. Yep. I got you. I like to cut out right when you ask a question. I think that's my internet over here. But yeah, so I feel like this is going to be one of those draft classes that we look back for Brett Veach and really measure his worth as a GM, because we're entering the actual, really the first stretch of the prime for Patrick Mahomes. He signed a deal that's relatively team friendly compared to he reset the market, but these other quarterbacks come behind him with more guaranteed money and all that stuff. They had to reset, especially on defense, and Brett Veach had to learn to sit and draft some guys. In fact, this was also the first time in his tenure that he traded down, when he traded down in the 2nd round. They made the Chiefs media, they made a joke about, there's a little golf clap when he traded down the whole 3 spots, because he's known as a pretty aggressive GM. He's traded up,
that's right,
and moved around, but he finally traded back down. It was. I think it's going to be just such an important draft when we look at it historically. When we look back 4, 5, 6 years from now, and to see, especially having 2 first-round picks when you really needed to add. You saw a departure of some pretty key players. 2019 championship team. You needed to add some faces to this franchise that no one's going to outshine Patrick Mahomes. At least, it'd be pretty incredible if they did. But you needed to add some other faces, some other running mates who can kind of shoulder some of that load.
Absolutely.
And
can't put it all on his shoulders all the time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start with, matter of fact, we talked about the secondary being an important aspect of what they were going to do to try to improve because of the players that were gone, including Charvarius Ward. So Trent McDuffie becomes the top pick, and what he lacks in size, he makes up for it. He seems to have like a bulldog mentality, which is nice. That helps in run support as well. By the way, he's got some punt return experience, and I wonder whether or not they're going to give him an opportunity there. But talking about a kid that slides right into the slot role.
They've talked about him playing outside. That's interesting. That might just be kind of that camp talk. They're trying to hype him up. What I've seen with Steve Spagnuolo in the secondary in the last couple of years is he really uses the term defensive back pretty interchangeably. So obviously they had Tyrann Mathieu, who played, deep safety. He played box safety. He played in the nickel. In the Super Bowl run, they had Kendall Fuller on the team, who, was a corner for them, played some outside, played a lot of nickel. And then at the very end, in the Super Bowl, he was playing safety after Juan Thornhill got. So he likes to have those guys. Legeria Snead is another one, who's drafted everyone thought he was a safety, and he played corner and safety in college, and they use him. They haven't used him at safety in the pros yet, but they use him in all kinds of different ways. So I think Trent McDuffie is maybe more of or a closer replacement to Tyrann Mathieu in terms of, again, moving some of those, like you said, that slot position, that inside down the seam, defending. I think they're going to try him on the outside. They're going to let him, rotate out there. There's some, just some size limitations there. Some of those matchups, I'm probably not going to put him on Devontae Adams,
Sure. Yeah.
One-on-one outside. Probably not advisable.
No. Well, Fenton, how does Fenton fit in this too? Because isn't he? Would you think that he is a better slot player, or what's his role? Where's he best fit?
Yeah, so Fenton's a weird one because he produces so well. Like, there's really nothing about him that you would go, this is a successful NFL player. When you look at his athletic profile, his arms are almost as short as Trent McDuffie. He's a short guy. He's slow. He ran a slow 40 time. But man, he just plays with, like you talked about, like that McDuffie. Dog mentality. Yeah, very similar in that sense. I think McDuffie is a better athlete. Fenton has stepped up in a pinch and has really been such a valuable player for this team. Legeria Snead, I think, is going to come in, probably be in that cornerback one. He's probably going to see a lot of those. He physically, he's a height, weight, speed guy, but he's probably going to see some of those more. He's the guy that you're probably going to want to put over, Devontae Adams. They invested a lot at defensive back. They traded for Lonnie Johnson from the Texans, and it sounds like they're going to play him at corner, not at safety. But who knows? That could change. Again, that some more of that corner safety flexibility. They've got some pieces that are just going to have to figure out who fits, the best where. But the biggest thing I think is they haven't really shoehorned themselves into saying, well, this guy has to play here, or this guy has like. They're going to work it out, and they've got players who have some of that flexibility. It is, in terms of like looking and going, oh, this is the guy like I know I can trust on the outside. I don't think they have that. There's some guys you're like, oh yeah, they make sense inside, but
so they don't have it's Snead, even though we've talked a lot about him over the last few years as being a really nice talent, and maybe he's on the verge of breaking out. He's got that ability, but the team doesn't really have that true number one guy. Is that why there was a lot of talk about Bradbury, and now Bradbury's available? So is that still a possibility?
So I think Bradbury just signed a little bit ago. And I can't even remember. Yeah, what team it was. I think he was a little bit more. I think it was right. Right before the Lonnie Johnson trade. But
by the way, what was the Lonnie Johnson trade?
It was like a conditional 7th round pick. It was.
Oh, that's nothing.
He wanted out. Yeah, he wanted out of Houston. He wasn't happy with how they were using him. He is excited to be in Kansas City.
Yeah, I could imagine. Houston to Kansas City.
Yeah, that whole defensive back room is just kind of up for grabs, and I think that competition is going to be interesting to watch throughout camp and preseason. So yeah, I think Snead comes in as the top guy, as the most experienced, probably also the best, height, weight, speed guy in that room. But we have to see him do it against the number ones. He's always kind of him and Ward were kind of interchangeable. They would, kind of trade off. It's going to be interesting to see who else ends up on the boundary. The Chiefs do talk like McDuffie is going to play there. So, if they've got that much confidence in him, that might be it. But we'll see how it works out.
Okay. It actually just took place, a day or two ago, that James Bradbury signed with the Eagles.
Yeah, that's who was, the Eagles. Yep.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. I've been neck deep in a whole bunch of other stuff. So there you go. And Bradbury is the top corner name on the market. Of course, Fuller is gone. And really, that was it. You don't have another guy like Bradbury's talent as far as somebody that could be, if he has a really good season, like a number one. So the Chiefs are pretty much set. And before we move on, do you think there are any other potential trades or free agency moves position-wise that they could target?
I don't know.
They have the cash.
Yeah, they do have the cash. So I think that they're probably waiting and seeing, wait to see who doesn't make it out of camp or who. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
who gets cut? Okay.
the defensive line is where I'm thinking they're going to look really hard. I think that they wanted to make some moves early in the
Akeem
offseason.
Hicks.
So yeah, I think
Everybody
he just
wants
signed.
Akeem Hicks.
I
He
think
just signed too.
I'm almost I might be crazy, Greg, but I think
On every show
like
that I've done, I think
one or
everybody
two.
has asked about Akeem Hicks. Oh, we really want Akeem Hicks. Oh,
I
the
could be
Bucks signed
wrong.
Akeem Hicks.
Yeah, I think he just signed again maybe a day or two ago.
So
So
yeah, so he's gone. Of course, he picks Tampa Bay of all places.
yeah, I think that they're going to look for kind of that Melvin Ingram type, a veteran who can just kind of be a rotational player.
Okay.
They've got George Karlaftis, but I think they want some more depth there, and it wouldn't hurt them to add another defensive tackle if they could find one.
Okay.
I'll throw this out there just as a wild idea. Doesn't in terms of trade people, Darion Payne in Washington sounds like he's not super happy in that situation, and the Chiefs have some extra mid-round picks next year. I wonder if I were in charge, I'd kick the tires on it, but I'm not in charge. So I mean, just throwing out ideas of the guys that I've kind of seen and heard might be on the move. Darion Payne, you have to deal with the contract side of things, but he might be a young guy that you can get in for a mid-round pick and just let him play out that last year and see how he does.
Yeah, and I like the pickup of Stallworth. I think Stallworth is an under-the-radar type of guy that could really find, especially when you're on a team like the Chiefs and you're going to be playing in big games. So that could be a nice under-the-radar move as well. I want to remind everybody that we're recording this show on Friday because it's possible we won't post this until like Monday.
Yeah.
To escape the weekend. Traffic, so the week traffic over the weekend. So anyway, just want to let everybody know that in case they're thinking, hey man, that happened a week ago.
No, yeah, well then we better any free agents we talk about will probably be signed by the time the time Monday.
Well, if that happens,
anyway.
then I'll post it. I'll post it over the weekend if there's a big trade or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you mentioned Carlaftis. So Carlaftis, great luck, whatever you want to call it, that he was still available as late as he was. There was a lot of talk early on that he was going to be a top 15 pick, but that kind of subsided as we got closer to the draft. And there he was available, pick number 30 in the first round. May not be the top athlete, but supposedly, a top shelf technician, a gym rat, one of those guys that coaches just going to fall in love with, and a guy that's going to be equally as good in the run and the pass. You got that one?
Scrolling through the R Lads guide just to kind of keep myself, paced up here. But I remember watching him and Aiden Hutchinson about this time last year as I was jumping into defensive end groups. And I remember just going, man, these guys, they have some similar traits. Now, I'm not saying Carlaftis is Aiden Hutchinson or anything like that, but I remember about this time last year, they were kind of grouped together. Obviously, Hutchinson had a huge senior year and went number 2 overall. So with Carlaftis, if you go back to his 2019 tape, it was a little bit better to me. It was a little flashier than his last year. The narratives around him are just kind of strange. It's like, well, he's not a very good athlete, but also he was a national level, water polo player, back in Greece. So it's like he's an athlete. I think he's just new to football.
Absolutely.
His ability to bend and that kind of thing, but that's never been a requirement for Steve Spagnuolo's system, right? He is huge on setting the edge, on power, and maybe just another little piece of inside tidbit here with Carlaftis. They've raved about how hard he works. You talked about with the coaches,
yes.
But there's also there's been some clips. So there's a well-known trainer in Kansas City who works with. He's known for working with Patrick Mahomes, Bobby Stroupe, Stroupe. I think that's how you say his last name. And Carlaftis got hooked up with him immediately and has been working with him on some flexibility and stuff. And so there's a little bit of Twitter buzz about that, and the Kansas City Chiefs world is going, oh, okay, he just turned 21 years old, so there's room to grow.
I think he's a safe pick. He is just because, like you said, he's young. He's got upside. Like you said, he may be not ready at this point to maximize his potential, but give him 3 or 4 years, and maybe he'll break out just about the time they'll need to decide what to do with his next contract, and then maybe that'll give him a really big extension, because he does fit the need too, because we talked about before the draft.
Yeah, and that's what they need.
Yeah, we talked about before the draft that the
For
Chiefs'
somebody
sack
else.
total had dropped 4 straight years.
Yeah, they, like I said, they need to grow their own talent there. They needed to kind of groom a pass rusher in house, and then Carlaftis is their first swing at that. I think that they'll take some more swings at that, in the next year or two. But they got to get some bodies. They traded for Frank Clark, and that was kind of hit or miss. I'm not the biggest fan. I know they've got Chris Jones, and he's not getting any younger, and he can't do it all on his own. If you go back to that AFC Championship game, which I got to watch that in person. As unfortunate as that is at the same time. But man, Chris Jones would get through the line and chase Joe Burrow around, and he would just roll out to his right or left and have 20 yards of green grass just to hang out. And there were a couple sacks where you're like, man, if you just had one guy who could just get a little bit more penetration, I'm just like, that's what I'm seeing is like, okay, George Karlaftis may not win immediately off the snap, but he's not going to let those second effort plays, those Jones pushes someone out of the pocket. He's gonna get some sacks just on that alone.
What about the kid Kando, the 4th rounder last year? Does he have any potential to keep an eye on this year?
Yeah, I think he's worth watching. I know he got shut down a little bit early last year, in terms of injuries. And I think they just kind of gave him a red shirt. Okay. That Florida State team he was coming from wasn't very good. His pedigree as a 5-star high school recruit, his athletic profile, they're all good. I still, when I watched him, I thought his hands didn't hit with as much oomph as I wanted them to, and all that. But a year in the system, a year in an NFL weight room, I definitely think that he's worth. And he played early last year. He just, like I said, he got an injury, and then they just kind of shut him down for the year. There's a high ankle sprain, and those can be tough. And I think they just knew that probably what was best for his development was to get him healthy and let him, put some muscle on his frame and learn the system. So
okay,
he's definitely a guy to watch. Could surprise some people.
All right. I tell you what, let's stick on defense. And with the next pick, with their second pick in round 2, they went with Brian Cook. Now, Cook actually started his career in the FCS at corner, switched to safety when he transferred over to Cincinnati, and then bam, first team All AAC at safety. Good size, tough kid, but he's got raw ability. There's things about him that need to be refined, which is fine, because Reed and Thornhill are there. So what about Brian Cook? How does he fit with what the Chiefs do on defense?
Yeah, so the Chiefs play a lot of 3 safeties, and so Brian Cook's going to have an opportunity to see some significant snaps in that secondary if he can work his way up the depth chart. I know they brought in some other free agents. I'm blanking on their names. I expect Cook to be a guy that they rotate in. Juan Thornhill's in a contract year, so Cook is one of those pieces in this draft class who, if he shows that he can be a starter in the NFL, that gives the Chiefs the flexibility to look at Juan Thornhill and say, hey, like, you might go get more money somewhere else. We've got insurance. Keep the band together. So Brian Cook's got a chance to be a future starter. I think you were right when we said, he's kind of new to the safety play, still learning the game. But man, he hits hard, and he also doesn't miss many tackles. That was the other, I've seen some kind of those advanced metrics on him, and I think his missed tackles in college were in the single digits. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong, but I remember seeing it and going, okay, he really doesn't miss tackles. When he gets a beat on a guy, he gets him and he takes him to the dirt. And I think if you watch the Chiefs defense, if you watch Mr. Daniel Sorensen, who's now in the Saints, you know that missed tackles were a problem in that secondary. So that should be a sigh of relief for all of Chiefs Kingdom.
Yeah, they definitely just got that much talented there. Again, kid plays in the box a lot, but I mean, really good instincts in that area of the field and lays a pop. Very good in run support. Okay, so let's stick with the corner, the secondary. So Joshua Williams from Division II was taken around 4, and Jalen Watson was taken around 7. Watson actually was a community college transfer, started 1 year at Washington State. And if you take a look at both of these guys, you talk about developmental guys, developmental corners. I mean, Williams being from a Division II school, really impressed at the Senior Bowl. And then you have the kid, Watson, you know, tall, lengthy kid. What did they like about both of those corners? And is that basically what we have here? Are a couple of guys that is not going to happen in 2022, but let's develop these kids for 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, there's certainly developmental pieces, especially Watson. So both these guys I had kind of heard, especially Williams, I heard a little bit more and kind of saw some connections. I believe the Chiefs had Watson in for a top 30 visit. I know that they were sniffing around him. And so, but the Joshua Williams one to me was one of the most intriguing picks, just because I think he's got the profile to be. We talked about needing that boundary starter. He's got the profile to do that. Now his level of competition is an issue. You don't know how he's going to hold up in the NFL. But when he played in these All-Star games, I think he was also the first HBCU guy taken in the draft. And I know last year there wasn't one, and I don't know if there was another. I think there was one other one that was taken this year. But yeah, his athletic profile. If you change the name, the name of the college, you'd probably be talking about a guy who went 2 rounds earlier,
Yeah,
2 or 3 rounds earlier.
Well, he didn't get an opportunity to play against top competition for years. He only had a week to play against the top competition.
Yep, and I think it was either Daniel. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah on the Move the Sticks podcast. He said about Josh Williams.
You dropped out there. What was that?
Oh, sorry. So the Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah. I believe he was the one who said with Josh Williams, all the postseason games that he played in, it looked like he belonged. He looked like he could keep pace with them. So that's encouraging for Chiefs fans.
All right. Well, again, both guys have Williams 6'2" height. The 4.5 speed is good enough when you're talking about a lengthy guy with the 6'2" height, and he's also athletic. And then you take a look at Watson, also tall and lengthy. So 2 guys that provide length and similar kind of traits to keep an eye on. Let's stick with the defensive backfield. Actually, let's move over to linebacker. Actually, there was one other player in the defensive backfield I want to talk about. That's Najee Johnson.
Yeah. Yep.
Last pick of the draft. Another guy with good size, 6'2", 189, a 5-year starter at Marshall with over 300 tackles, 7 career interceptions, and had a huge pro day, 4.36 40, which I'm sure had a lot of scouts going back to the tape. But here's a guy that they were able to land with the last pick of the draft.
Yeah. So this guy was a lot of fun. I've not just his measurables and all that. I think that he's a guy, Brett Veach talked about when you have a bunch of 7th round picks, you're kind of getting into, who are your priority free agents and kind of taking some lottery tickets on. And I think he was one of those guys. I think he's going to carve out a role on special teams more than likely. I think he is built like a gunner. Like you're going to want him out there, just running downfield and flying and hitting somebody. But with that athletic profile, I think he has a chance to stick on this roster for several years, just as a guy on special teams and could probably see some spot duty. If you really needed him to, at the very least, he's big enough and he can run with people. So I'm not, I don't think he's going to be an all-star, or all-pro safety by the end of the year 2 or 3, but I think that he'll be a solid contributor, especially on special teams, because that was another area, we talked about like Dan Sorensen earlier. That was a special teams guy. There's a couple other guys, Ben Neiman, that was a special teams guy. There's a lot of guys who played special teams that, aren't on the roster anymore. So you got to fill some of those holes. And I think Najee Johnson definitely has a lot of that appeal while he develops.
And that's where a lot of your special teams guys come from, are the bottom end of the draft, which is what the Chiefs just haven't had enough of those picks. So
Yeah.
now you get a plethora of picks. You can add some of those guys and create better special teams play. And we know they have, of course, one of the top special teams coaches. So
Mhm.
last player on defense was Leo Chenal out of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a second-team All-America. Now, I have a big question
Mhm.
regarding this player because our lads basically scouted him as a run-stuffing middle linebacker,
Mhm.
but excellent blitz skill. He's
Yep.
somebody that when it was passing downs, you don't want him in coverage, so
Mhm.
you have him blitz. So he's got that combination. Where does it with Nick Bolton on the team? Where does he fit?
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I was not a big. I didn't expect them to invest in linebacker heavily. They kind of had their two guys
Yeah.
in Bolton and Willie Gay.
Sure.
That they'd spent second round picks on, and they were pretty happy with them. I was surprised by the pick, so I had to go back and do some more homework on Leo Chenal. So he's, to answer your question, he's going to play Sam. He's going to be that strong side outside linebacker who historically Steve Spagnuolo has used a lot to blitz. During that championship year, they oh goodness, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Played for Alabama. Reggie Ragland is who they had playing their Sam, and so I think they're going to use him very similarly. Coming out, we had like you said, Nick Bolton, that run stuffing kind of thumper middle linebacker. He improved tremendously in coverage throughout the year, and I mean, obviously, there's some physical limitations. The difference with Leo is it's a lot more mental for him in terms of his coverage. He has the physical profile. He's a 9.9, RAS athlete. I think he was the third best linebacker in the last 40 years in terms of just like total athletic scores. I think he's going to be one of those guys that the Chiefs love, like the fans love to watch. I don't think he might make a Pro Bowl in his career or two, but I think he's going to be one of those just starter level players that's going to be just so much fun to cheer for. Just works his, one of the themes of the draft class was, high character guys who work really hard. And I think, with some of the other personalities that were on this team previously, when you're restocking the cabinets, you're kind of thinking, okay, what did you learn from the last time around? And some of that is going, hey, like we need some guys who are going to maybe stay off Twitter and get to work, or keep their heads down, who are going to, be represent the organization a little bit.
And they love football and high energy player. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. By the way, before we move to offense, I wanted to add a couple of guys that the team signed because they signed two linebackers, one from South Dakota, who I have never seen, obviously, but who had a productive career there in the FCS level, team captain, 5 years, 39 starts, all sorts of numbers. The kid Cochran. But Mike Rose, now here's a guy that I was just shocked was not drafted. Absolutely shocked. Now, I know our lads only had him as a 5th-round grade, but I'm still shocked. What's the dog's name?
Oh, this is Scout.
Scout. All right.
Appropriately
perfect
enough.
Name.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I didn't give him attention, he was going to start barking and ruin the whole show.
Yeah. So give him attention. All the attention he needs.
He likes to be on camera.
He's
Mike Rose. Yeah. He's one that I was with you. I was like, he didn't get drafted. How did he not get drafted? I know he didn't run the fastest 40 time.
Yep. Not the greatest athlete, all that crap.
Yeah. So I mean, just 1-to-1, I think that he fits really well as, to take this by. I just mentioned Ben Neiman, and I was like, man, like that's the type of player. I think Mike Rose has a little bit more, upside.
Sure.
But that's who it is. That kind of sub package. He's used to kind of counter Leo Chenal, in those coverage packages. So you want to have reasonable expectations for your undrafted guys, but he's one I'm definitely excited about.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, if you look at it, he's got good size. He was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year in 2020.
Yeah.
He was first team last year. And he also, with the 5 interceptions in 2020, he proved that he can cover. So he can cover. He's really good in the run game. And what we just mentioned before, he loves football. Loves to play the
absolutely.
game. And that's what the team, like you said, is looking for. Keep an eye on Mike Rose. And again, Cochran, we'd have no really idea about what this kid's done in his career other than stats, but he is a player to watch based on that. So I'm not sure. And we'll round it out if you can, basically let me know if you've heard any news at all from OTAs and rookie camp about any of these guys looking good. But before I get to that, let's talk offense. And Sky Moore, big surprise. Knew they were going to add a receiver at some point. Andy Reid definitely going to do that after, losing, of course, Tyreek and so forth. But Sky Moore, not the biggest guy, but what does he have that Andy Reid loves? That is speed. Speed guy, 4.39, and with elite quickness, excellent route running, especially at this stage of his career. So, how much? See, if he goes to a team with a 5-win kind of campaign and a journeyman quarterback, you probably don't hear much about him. But on the Chiefs, I can imagine with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes what they might be able to do with this kid.
Yeah. Yep, and that's going to be it. They're going to be so creative. When Tyreek Hill came into the NFL, he was very raw as a route runner. Sky Moore's kind of already
he's done that.
Is light years ahead.
Yeah.
He's light years ahead. I think that you can't compare, right? That Tyreek has an elite trait in the speed. I think that you're going to see more used a lot in the movements and those crossing patterns in a similar fashion. Maybe not as much as a deep threat, but I just think Andy Reid has got to be just absolutely thrilled with a player who has so much versatility in terms of how you can move him, in terms of where you can move him around pre-snap, what you can ask him to do. I think he has an underrated catch radius. I thought his hands were really strong. Compared to some of the other receivers, especially that went in that range. Like, and I know the knock on him is he wasn't, not as big as other guys, but his hands are huge. I think he's got 11, or 10, or I think 10.5-inch hands or something crazy like that. Like, I think he had the biggest hands for wide receivers in the draft. Like there are offensive and defensive linemen out there with smaller hands than Sky Moore. So the catch radius, the ability to track a ball, man, it's going to be fun to watch him develop in this offense. And I think the best part, I know Tyreek left, but the Chiefs added other receivers, and so Sky Moore doesn't have to come in day one and be the top guy. He has some room to grow and adjust that level of competition. But man, there's going to be some highlight plays that are gonna make the rounds with this kid. I just feel it.
Yeah, well, look, if you think about it, with Hardman being a second-round draft pick, I mean, Moore had much more production in college than Hardman has, and Hardman has yet to prove himself as somebody that you can rely on as even a number 2. So Sky Moore, watch out. I'd take him in a minute on a dynasty team. And also on offense at wide receiver, I wanted to talk about the kid they signed, Justin Ross. 6'4" size, had that huge freshman season when they won the national championship with Trevor Lawrence with a 21.7 average per catch. It was thought that he was going to be a lock first-round draft pick at that point. And then everything went downhill with the neck injury and the foot injury. He runs a 4.6 40. But still, our lads thought he was a third-round talent, and he doesn't even get drafted. Yeah,
so the medicals there, I think the kind of the rumor, the rumblings is that, Justin Ross was only medically cleared by 4 teams in the NFL, the Chiefs being one of them. His neck injury it wasn't just that he had spinal fusion surgery. So there's part of his spine is now a metal rod, and that's affected his movement skills. But that happened, and he came back and played for Clemson, and then he had the foot injury and that kind of thing. And so I'll say this: you always want to be reasonable about the expectations for undrafted free agent guys. At the same time, this is the time of the year where everybody gets hyped up, and I will tell you that the Chiefs are playing into it. Travis Kelce's tweeting about the kid. Patrick Mahomes is, the Chiefs social media team it's like every time they have an OTA or a practice or they're like, I think they've tweeted more about him than they have, Carlaftis or McDuffie, their first round picks. So
Trying to build up his confidence, probably too.
Yeah, they're building. There's a lot of hype around Justin Ross, and rightfully so. That freshman year was special.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you can get even 75% of that as a player, you're getting an absolute steal as for from an undrafted kid. So, and just I think on the other side of that, like you want to see a guy like this who's worked his whole life to play in the NFL. You want to see him succeed.
He's a hardworking guy. Yes.
Yeah. Those injuries, I think even before he signed, he's tweeting out, and some of his teammates, from college were saying, this kid's going to prove him wrong. And there was that kind of mentality of like, all right, like just give me a chance. I think that was his tweet was, I just want a chance.
Well,
and he's got it. I think he's got as good a chance as anywhere else in Kansas City.
That's right. Okay. And then 2 more players on offense they signed. Running back Darion Canard. And we talked about them adding a running back in the draft, which they did, which we'll get to in a minute. But I wanted to talk about Canard first, because Canard, if you look at it, I actually think Canard could have easily been the drafted one, and Pacheco could have been the kid they signed, because Canard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think could end up as their top kick returner. I think that could be something that works out. He was second team SEC return specialist. He has 2 career touchdowns on the kick return. Now, he only ran a 4.52 40, but he was the top running back with the broad jump. So it shows you he's got athletic ability. Matter of fact, he's an elite athlete. Okay, so maybe not the speed, but everything else, great athlete. He's also excellent as a receiver out of the backfield. So again, with Pacheco, it's amazing. He runs that incredible 40. He also has limited kick return experience. He led Rutgers in rushing for 3 years and has over 2,000 career rushing yards and 18 touchdowns over, and 47 career receptions. I know I'm a Rutgers fan, being from New Jersey. So I could see both of these guys really battling it out for that final spot, and maybe even one of these guys surprising. Or maybe Canard makes the team as the kick returner, and Pacheco could still make the team. Maybe he knocks Gore off the team.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a very good chance that Gore is a guy who I think is got to be sweating after 2 additions. I think when you talk about like the styles of players, right, that they had on their roster last year, to me, it's like I can almost see the 1-to-1 where I see Pacheco as a guy who's going to be more of that, he's a tough runner, right? You feel him when you go to tackle him.
Yes.
And that reminds me a lot of what they had in Darrell Williams last year. And then, like you talked about, he's not the best athlete, but he's got really good receiving skills. He's really good in space. And that makes me think of who they had on the roster last year with Jerick McKinnon. And it's like, you're looking at player types, especially in the running back room, and looking to replace some of these guys who left in free agency. And you get a little bit of, kind of a mold of like, okay, these are the roles that they're going to play. I think this is very likely that both, Canard and Pacheco make the team. I think Gore ends up back on and I could be wrong, or maybe, one of them ends up on the practice squad, but they we'll see how it works out. But I think that it's a competition to watch between the two. But it really makes sense just from a 1-to-1, like, oh, here are the guys that were on the team last year, and you can kind of see stylistically how these are their replacements.
Canard, you think he has a reasonable chance to be the number 1 kick returner?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. They lost Byron Pringle in free agency, and he was one of those guys. He was at one point, I think, had the highest average return in the league. For I know at some point last year, and I think the year before, he was really developing into a top quality kick returner. So it's a big hole on the roster, and that might give Canard the edge even over the drafted player to make the roster.
Yeah, it should be. Again, I think it's a great battle there. Canard and Pacheco, 2 hard-nosed runners who will add something to their backfield. And look, they're also looking for somebody who has the ability to give them the big yard gains that they're just not getting from Edwards-Helaire. Now, I don't know, Ronald Jones can do that. I'm not even sure Pacheco or Canard could, but hey, you know what? Yeah. If you give him a chance with this offense, we've seen running backs late in the draft and in even free agency come out of nowhere and turn into really quality pros. Quarterback that they signed, Dustin Crum. the kid from Kent State. Is he going to battle Buechele as the long-term backup on the team?
I know they really like Buechele, so I'm going to say it's an uphill battle. They always bring in a quarterback, whether they draft one or bring one in.
But they really like Buechele.
Yeah, I think that if I remember right, he was working out with Mahomes in Texas. He seems to be that guy who's just becoming the understudy, and I would be surprised. Again, not the craziest thing that could happen, but I would be surprised if Dustin Crum, it could be a practice squad guy, but I think that it's just, you bring in a body, kind of keep those guys at the bottom of the roster on their toes. You want people to stay competitive and to stay motivated to compete, especially, you want to make sure if there is talent out there, you go bring it in and it has a chance. But yeah, I'm not holding my breath on Dustin Crum, although he seems like a good kid and has worked hard to get where he is.
I think it's the right fit for him. That's probably why he signed. I think he's perfect for RPOs, high tempo offense. He's a runner. He can run. He's got good accuracy. I think the big knock on him is he's not a good deep ball passer.
Yeah.
Didn't play against the greatest competition and all that. So, and I get that. He's not going to be a starter in the NFL. But I just thought, hey, if he's somebody that is going to make it and stick, whether it's first practice squad, then maybe, and who knows, maybe Chad Henne has one more year. They stick Crum on the practice squad for a year, and then next year Crum and Buechele are both on the team. That's something that could happen. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like I said, it's a chance. Or again, just working with Andy Reid, I think as a young quarterback is to your benefit.
Priceless.
So get that knowledge, and even if it's somewhere else, he's talented enough to stick around for a while. So
I think so.
I'm sure he'll land wherever he needs to. But I think it's a little bit uphill in Kansas City. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Chad Henne next year.
All right, and then again, we talked about Pacheco already as far as one of the offensive players they drafted and more. The only other player we haven't talked about is Darion Canard. And this is an interesting conversation because Canard was a first-team All-America as a tackle and actually was also, I believe, a third-team All-America in 2020. So he's been highly praised for the last couple of years playing in the SEC, but doing it as a tackle. Now, he was a fifth-round pick. Our lads had him as a third-round grade, so that was a good value there. You're talking about a guy not very athletic, but he's like a road grader, a guy which also, because of the fact that he doesn't have great footwork, I think our lads feels that he's better suited on the interior at guard. Where does he fit in? Why did they draft him? Did they draft him because he has no experience playing guard, really? So did they feel that they could work with him as a tackle prospect, or do you think that they will eventually move him to guard?
They are planning on letting him compete for the starting right tackle job. They said that the day he was drafted, which was a surprise, I think. But when you look at some of the tackles, so Lucas Niang, very similar body type, very similar, criticisms. Orlando Brown, very similar. I mean, Orlando Brown is a massive human.
Yes.
But some of the same, the footwork, is he fast enough? Is he agile? They're going to let him fail at tackle, and then if they need him to play inside at guard, they'll do that. But they're kind of set along the interior. And after Lucas Niang's injury last year, I think there is a chance, probably tackle, on that first team unit, and I'd say there's maybe a 50% chance he's the starter by the end of the the So he's got a chance to be a starter. Yeah, that's
what's Niang's prognosis?
He should. I think he's gonna be ready for camp, but it was a patellar bone injury, and a patellar tendon injury, and those are just he's had all these lower body injuries, and it seems like some of them are kind of connected, and it's been just tough. He's been good when he's been available, like he's been steady, but he's not been. The health is the big thing, and then just his development that's really hampered his development. I was one of the biggest Lucas Niang fans out there, this time last year. But man, it's been hard to watch such a young player go through those injuries.
All right, before I let you go, Anybody else that I didn't talk about, and you mentioned Ross, anybody else that they have talked about that either comes from this class, like somebody they signed, or one of the late round kids, or someone that was a late round addition last year, or a practice squad kind of guy that might be now getting an opportunity to possibly make an impact this season?
Yeah, so I mean, this whole team has just a lot of like spots up for grabs for such a high quality like team. I've got one name that comes to mind, but let me pull here and like make sure there's not somebody I'm forgetting about entirely. We talked about Kando earlier. Yeah, okay. So the one guy that and it was rookie minicamp, so you take it with a grain of salt. But the it's kind of described as a man among boys was Malik Herring, who was a defensive end prospect out of Georgia last year, who tore his he tore his ACL during the Senior Bowl, I think the first or second day of the Senior Bowl practices.
Okay.
Pretty much got a red shirt, and they said that he really looked good in some of these camps so far. So a thin position for the Chiefs. I don't remember. I'll be honest. I'm not gonna pretend like I was a huge Malik Herring fan last year. I think he was a day 3 grade type of guy, but that year off, that year of strength and conditioning at the pro level, you never know what that looks like for these athletes. These guys are world class at what they do, and it's a name to watch just as a guy who might end up surprising people as a contributor.
Good one. Okay. So he would be the top guy from last year. And you're saying Ross is probably the top guy this year.
Yeah. Yep. And I think Herring was undrafted last year as well. And he didn't play. Like I said, he tore his ACL early in Senior Bowl, and he didn't play at all last year. But there's been some buzz about him, and he's a big kid, 6'3" and 280 pounds and 280 pounds, which is about what Steve Spagnuolo likes, bigger defensive ends in the even front. So
yeah, he was a 5th round grade last
year. Definitely a name to watch during the preseason.
Yeah, he was a 5th round grade last year, and Ross a 3rd round grade from our lads this year. And look, we're going to talk again at some point as we get closer, and maybe even at least we'll do a preview of the season. Definitely we'll do something along those lines. So that's why I wanted to kind of pick your brain for some of these other things that are going on as far as camp battles and things of that nature. So I think we've covered as much as we're going to do on this show. Appreciate it as always, Tom, and glad to see now that you're kind of settled in, because I know the last time we talked, I think you had been your luggage was still like half packed.
Yep, I was still I was pretty freshly off the unpacking. So getting settled here. Thanks. As always, it's great to talk Chiefs with you. And
now you got to fix the internet coverage.
Yeah, we're working on that one slowly but surely. So.
All right, Tom, just kidding. Again, great job. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again before the season begins.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Greg.